Hey guys, it's Nate and this is the 80/20 Drummer. So I thought I would do a jazz lesson because it's been a hot minute since I've done a jazz lesson. Been getting a bunch of requests for jazz lessons and also been getting a bunch of questions. And I thought I'd spend today's lesson going sort of back to basics and addressing a question that's probably the most common question I get about jazz drumming, which is traditional grip versus matched grip. Hey Nate, it goes, I'm playing jazz drums in XYZ program at XYZ college, or I just joined a jazz ensemble. I want to get into jazz in a more authentic way. Do I need to learn traditional grip, or can I continue to play match grip if that's what I've been learning? So I'm going to give you 3 reasons why, well, let's say this. I'm going to give you an answer to that, a practical answer to that, and then give you 3 reasons why I think that that answer is a good one. And then later on in the lesson, I'm going to give you a cool exercise or beat you can play with either grip, which will help you increase your swing feel and make it a little bit lighter. But before we even cover that, let's just quickly talk about what we're talking about when we talk about these 2 different grips. So traditional grip, obviously, is the grip where the stick is primarily supported between the thumb and the index finger. And then what'll happen is that between the very tip and the first knuckle on the ring finger on the left hand or on the comping hand, if you're left-handed, whichever hand is going to comp as opposed to play the ride cymbal, loops underneath the stick like this. And this is your primary fulcrum as I learned it. There are different approaches to this, but this is what John Riley taught me, and this is what a bunch of other people teach. The only other ingredient to this is that the tip of the thumb touches the index finger between the first and second knuckle. So when you do that, you have what's called the cage, which is the stick resting between here and here, and it's there that you're going to get a lot of your power and your control. So you can increase your tightness on the stick by scissoring these 2 fingers in opposition to each other. You can make it looser by dropping the 4th finger away. So next, let me show you a couple very fundamental exercises for the left hand or the comping hand with traditional grip that I learned that I used to practice. And essentially what we're going to do is adapt something called the Moeller method. And the Moeller method has a deep history which is too deep and long for me to go into and extensively in this lesson. I can do another lesson on the Moeller method if we want to. But essentially drummers like Vinny, who play traditional grip, and Joe Morello is another famous example, come out of this Moeller method. The idea is that it's about big muscle movements producing multiple sounds at once. So the archetypal example would be and of course you'd make that a lot looser. Right, but you're putting the accent there. So the variation to this that I used to like to practice was the Moeller method, but without the accent, trying to make the strokes as even as possible. And the quickest way to start with that was just producing 2 strokes with a single wrist motion, and then you could do 3. So you would think of, say, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, but instead of making those singles, so you see how each stroke is its own up-down movement with the stick. I would try to make 1 motion for the downstroke and then catch the stick with the upstroke. So And the other rule was that I tried to stay in the center of the drum with this. It's been a few years since I practiced this, so it's probably not super clean. But this is a great thing you can practice with your traditional grip. And you can also practice the same thing with the right hand. So you can think of 8 strokes with the left hand, 8 strokes with the right, all using this method. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Etc. So when you get that together, that'll give you a really great, because this is the move you're going to be doing with the comping hand when you're playing any sort of syncopation exercise against the cymbal. So the next is just 3-stroke groups. So 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. And again, that's even a little more accent than I like to do, but you can do 1 bar of triplets with the left hand followed by 1 bar of triplets with the right. So 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Okay, so that's a great exercise for traditional grip. And you can add that to whatever else you're doing, but that will give you a really easy sense of how this sort of cage concept works and when to go tighter, when to go looser, how you can kind of balance things on these hands like this. So there are a bunch of other subtleties with traditional grip, including turning the hand over and playing like this, which some drummers like to do. I always like to kind of keep it simple. So besides that, if you want to do traditional grip, practice your regular rudiments, practice your regular Riley exercises, whatever it is you're doing for swing, stuff out of my course maybe. So, with all of that said, I'm now going to make the case for why, if you don't want to, you don't need to learn traditional grip to play jazz. So, reason number 1 is traditional grip evolved for an era and a context which we no longer use in modern playing. So, I'm sure many of you have heard this story, but snare drumming is a tradition that comes from the military, at least as we know it, the field drum. And back in the day, before anyone invented a drum harness that would hang a drum on our shoulders flat in front of us the way modern drum lines use it, we used to wear snare drums on a sling. So the snare drum would be tilted. And indeed, if you look at the snare drums of many modern drummers who play mostly traditional grip, although almost every modern jazz drummer plays a mixture of traditional and matched. But say someone like Greg Hutchinson, who plays a lot of traditional, if you look at the way he sets his snare up, it's got a pretty dramatic tilt to it. Another drummer I used to watch live who had a really, really big tilt in his snare drum, and he tilted it down and forward, was Marcus Baylor. And the idea was they wanted to optimize for that natural stroke of the hand. But we no longer need to compensate for an inferior way of putting our drums. We have modern drum hardware that lets us set up our drums any way we want. So the original impetus for the traditional grip no longer exists. Hence, there's no practical reason not to play match grip. So reason number 2, that all other things being equal, if you're only going to choose one grip, match grip is superior when you're playing jazz, is traditional grip, if you're not careful, can create posture problems. Because in order to create an advantageous angle with the drum, where the stick isn't encountering the drum at a severe angle, we need to lower our left shoulder. So if we're not either being very careful about our posture or turning the drum to make traditional grip easier, it's very likely we're going to lower our shoulder. And indeed, it used to be, I think now it's a little less so because a lot of these coaches coach posture, but if you looked at a video of the North Texas drumline in like the late 90s, when they were still playing traditional grip, marching snare drums by and large still play traditional grip, but they had modern marching harnesses which put the drum flat at their waists, you would see a dip in the left shoulder. And I don't need to get a physical therapist on here to describe to you all the multiple ways in which playing chronically with a dip in your left shoulder is going to be an issue. I think probably if you watch old videos of Weckl or Vinny, you'll see that as well. Certainly with Buddy Rich, a lot of these guys have a dip in the left shoulder. So there is a potential physical ergonomics posture issue with this. And reason number 3 why, all things being equal, if you can only play one grip, matched grip is superior for jazz, is you can do almost everything you can do with traditional grip with matched. A lot of the traditional jazz fill and solo vocabulary had this cross-stick vocabulary. So that, although it's a little more difficult, you can certainly still do with match grip. And indeed, you need to look no further than Ari Honig for an example of someone who plays a lot of great cross-stick vocabulary with traditional grip. And what's more, matched grip, while not sacrificing the stick-on-stick vocabulary that comes out of the older jazz soloing, the soloing masters, you also have at your disposal easier rim shots. So you're able to do things right, you can do that Marcus Gilmore, which I'll show you how to do in the latter part of the lesson. So, 3 reasons why matched grip is superior if you're only going to play one grip. And the thing floating over all of this is if you're doing any kind of backbeat music, if you're doing any kind of playing where you're playing a rock or a funk beat and you need a constant rim shot, then match grip is 100% superior, both in terms of the lower amount of energy you need to expend to get a good rim shot, a more relaxed playing posture, the ergonomics, etc., etc. With all of that said, what do I do when I play jazz? I still play both. And here's why. If you love traditional grip and you love getting inside the minds of the old masters like Elvin, Kenny Clarke, Art Blakey, Arthur Taylor, Philly Joe, etc., Tony Williams, all of these guys played with traditional grip. And I think there's a certain kinesthetic sense that gets lost when you're playing with match grip. And you guys who play both grips will understand what I'm talking about. It feels different when you play traditional grip. I've always played traditional grip with brushes. I switch back and forth with sticks. But there are certain contexts in which you want it to feel to you as close to the way it felt to Philly Joe or Kenny Clarke or Blakey or Elvin as possible. And the best way to get into that, in my humble opinion, is by playing traditional grip. Even with the higher cost when it comes to now you need to practice and maintain 2 completely different grips, the lack of practicality, the risks to your posture, I still think if you're super serious about jazz, it's worth learning to play both. So that's my humble opinion on that subject. Now let's look at a simple beat which will make your swing a little more effervescent. It'll make it bounce a little more, which you can play with both grips. Okay, so the finished beat is going to sound like this. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So, how do we get into that? First, we're going to practice playing the beat with the right hand on 8th offbeats. So really slowly, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4. And what are we trying to combat with this? Why are we learning this beat? What eventually we're going to do is just give our swing more lightness. We're going to kind of break ourselves out of the... that you can kind of get into when you're practicing a lot of these traditional swing exercises. So again, 2, 3, 4. Okay, next step is we add skipped notes to the ride cymbal. So slower, that'll sound like 3, 4. And finally, we add this little Marcus Gilmore-ish flourish on the end, which sounds like 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Let me play that really slow. So let me play that in the context of a regular swing beat. 2, 3, 4. Okay, so what'll that sound like when we add it to the end of our little pattern? It'll sound like this. 2, 3, 4. Finally, if you're practicing this with matched grip, you can do the other variation of this, which is... And how do we do that? It's simple. Is the slow motion, and if you think about it a little sped up in a context. So little technique note about this. How do you make the second stroke louder than the first? How do you go? I actually think about a double fast twitch and aiming for the accented notes. So let's try that in the larger context with the groove. So 2, 3, 4. And there you have it. Hopefully that helps you a little bit understand how I approach match grip versus traditional grip, as well as giving you a juicy little exercise to dig into no matter what grip you're playing. Guys, if you've been following the channel, if you've been digging the lessons and you like what you see and you feel like maybe it's time to go a little bit deeper, maybe you're ready to study with me, I recommend my product, the 80/20 coaching course, which has a jazz variant with 12 modules that, in addition to improving the other aspects of your playing, like the fundamentals, take you through 12 modules of sequential jazz, learning my sort of fundamentals, which will augment the things you've already learned and hopefully help you open up your jazz playing and play a little bit more creatively at the same time as making your fundamentals more solid. That's the 80/20 coaching course. We only open that a few times a year. If you'd like a completely free gateway drug to that, as well as being on the wait list so you are notified the next time it opens, I recommend you click below the player and pick up my 3 free videos, which will make your playing better in the next 3 weeks than it's gotten in the last 6 months. At least one of those is a tailor-made jazz course that'll give you more of an idea like what my really structured jazz instruction looks like. Dudes, it's been super fun. I'm going to be back really soon with another lesson of the week, and we're going to do a lot more jazz stuff. It's been real. Thanks. See you.